There's I didn't know if this was gonna work. Like I couldn't figure out when this would work in the podcast, but there was something that I found on Quora a couple of days ago, and the question was, what type of good programmers would you never hire? And someone quoted General Kurt von Hammerstein Eckward, who apparently served in who's a German general, commander-in-chief, famous for being an opponent of Hitler and the Nazi regime. And he said that, he's like, I divide my officers into 4 groups. There are clever, diligent, stupid, and lazy officers. Usually 2 characteristics are combined. Some are clever and diligent. Their place is the general staff. The next lot are stupid and lazy. They make up 90% of every army and are suited to routine duties. Anyone who is both clever and lazy is qualified for the highest leadership duties because he possesses the intellectual clarity and the composure necessary for difficult decisions. One must be aware of anyone who is stupid and diligent. He must not be entrusted with any responsibility because he will always cause only mischief.
Oh my. I feel like you should go to like a job interview and like read that quote and be like, I want you to know
I'm clever and lazy.
yeah. And then you just walk out.
Public space travel. Public space travel. And so on and so on.
I can't help but believe that in the future we'll see throughout the world an increasing trend toward the next logical step. We'll achieve full communism.
Public space travel. Public space travel. And so on and so on.
Welcome to Public Space Travel. We are a podcast dedicated to social, political critique, comedy, and education. Coming from an anti-hierarchy, oppression perspective, we aim for progressive, radical left solidarity with brothers, sisters, trans, and non-binary folk of all stripes. I'm Lazarus Wolf, and with me today are Luci.
The Lucinator is here.
And Marks.
Thanks, Art. I'm glad to be on Coast to Coast with you today.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your Area 51 experience? I mean, we know that the children were out there protesting climate change, but tell me about the real youth, the ones out there protesting the imprisonment of extraterrestrials. We wanted to discuss and examine some topics, interview people that you want to hear about. And today we are actually going to address one, which we'll get to in just a second. And we've also like to make some corrections for things we've said if we need to, always. So please reach out to us at publicspacetravel@gmail.com, or you can leave us a voicemail at 208-502-1406. Also, if you enjoyed this show, please support us with a small monthly patron pledge of solidarity for only $5 a month at patreon.com/publicspacetravel. Today's episode is going to be addressing a question by one of our listeners and one of our patrons, David. He asked the question, why is capitalism not the best economic system? And so today we'll kind of take a little stab at it, but we do want to say that it is a very large topic. There's a lot of kind of angles and intersections you can go at here. Today would just be a few of the kind of attacks at this. We will be doing actually more episodes on this. We will bring in some special guests to help us address this.
Yeah, this first episode is like a warm up to get into the discussions, because I think for me, like I have a lot of thoughts about capitalism, and we've kind of gone over this obviously in previous episodes and things, but I consider myself kind of like an everyman in terms of like what I know about how to dissect capitalism and economic structure. So
absolutely.
So there's so much to cover, and we're going to take as much time as we need to go over this as much as we can. Obviously, it's going to branch out, and we're going to have other episodes to dig into this, because I can already tell it's just going to be a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, David, for asking that question. I think it's an important question, incredibly relevant for today. And again, if you, the listener, have questions, please throw it our way and we will address it.
Send us your Q's and we'll give you our A's. I've one of the things. So wait, can I just go into like one of the, like I have a question.
Yeah.
With capitalism, one of the things that's always so hard is I was born and raised in a capitalist society, and I'm just used to it. Like I'm so used to it, or at least I think I'm used to it. And you know, like I know we're gonna get into this eventually, but like one of the things is like, is capitalism part of like owning something, like having a laptop or enjoying a TV sitcom series? Is that sort of participating in capitalism when you do something like that? One of the things I would struggle with is like, I love video games. I spent too much money on video games. Am I feeding into capitalism by being a gamer? Am I, you know, almost a musician? If I buy instruments, am I also feeding capitalism that way? Like, is one of the things I always think about, like, because I feel against it. Like, I feel like in my heart, like I'm against it. But I also feel like I love having my own stuff in my own space. So I don't, like, there's a lot of like internal, like cognitive dissonance, I think, whenever I start to like really dig into it. And there's like a lot of paradoxical elements that I can't seem to fully come to terms with. And so I don't know if this is a good jumping off point, but it's just something that was just burning in my mind.
Yeah, no.
As I was thinking about it.
I think that's some like great kind of points, because I think these are some of the concerns that some people have about, like, oh, when you mean a non-capitalist society, you mean like I can't own anything. And I don't think that is true. Like 100%. I don't think that's something that you have to worry about. I don't think it's a misunderstanding. I think it's definitely kind of coming from a place of like the capitalist counterpoint that's really bullshit. And we'll address that concern.
The government's going to come in and take all of our video games.
And it is
you could pry them from my cold, dead, fatigued hands.
To tie that in, I just thought of this. Like, actually, I think so. Some people, you can imagine that some people who have those concerns that you mentioned, when they hear Beto O'Rourke talking about like, oh, and we're going to take your guns away, that's a great example of like, there we go. There's the wild, like left leaning socialist. And there they go. The big government coming in and taking the guns away. They're taking away my private property. I think that's it's a misunderstanding of like what's going on. Two, it has a whole other thing with Beto and like taking guns away and like all of that. But I think the thing here is that in order to address that question, I think we should first start off by, you know, looking at what capitalism is and kind of the couple fundamental aspects. And this, I promise you, will tuck in to this notion of private property. So,
okay, tuck me in.
All right, here we go. Capitalism. Just throwing it out there. I'm going to try to use not a lot of jargon because, you know, I don't want to sound like that academic. Capitalism is essentially the dominant socio-economic system since about the 17th century. When we say the dominant socio-economic system, what we're saying here is that, like, you can even see it today, like globally, it's become the way that society functions and works, whether it be your economics to society and the institutions kind of shaped on the economic and within the economic, immersed in the economic stuff. That's what it is. I think that your point earlier about I was born into this society, one of the first things I was thinking about was like kind of like I think for some people, you can imagine that it becomes like breathing air. Like you don't even really notice it. It's just kind of, it's always been there. It's like a fish. Does the fish notice water? Like one of those kind of things. So I don't know. There's something I was thinking about, but back to capitalism and some of the key components here. Number one is private property. Now, private property in a critique of capitalism way, and we're talking about a Marxist kind of critique of capitalism here. Private property is private ownership of the means of production. And that means of production are the tools and the raw materials used to create something. So to understand that private property, if you imagine like today's society, like the capitalist society, try to visualize it. Walmart, for example, owns kind of the distribution centers, the trucks, the boxes that have all your stuff in it, which they own and they ship out to you. And like, they control all of that. It's private ownership by a small, like, family, like the Walmart family, but it's the corporation itself, right? They own all of that. In comparison, that's opposed to the workers controlling everything. So in a situation like that, like a socialist or communist society or anarchist society, any of those kind of, non-capitalist societies, this is where the workers themselves will control all of the workplace and all of the materials, the tools, etc. Mm-hmm. So I think there is kind of there's an interesting quote by Jean-Jacques Rousseau out of his discourse on the origin of inequality. And I think this helps highlight essentially what's going on here in terms of private property. He says, the first man who, having fenced in a piece of land, said, "This is mine," and found people naive enough to believe him, that man was the true founder of civil society. And I'd argue like capitalism, but really civil society. From how many crimes, wars, and murders, from how many horrors and misfortunes might not anyone have saved mankind by pulling up the stakes or filling in that ditch and crying out to his fellow friends, "Beware of listening to this impostor. You are undone if you once forgot that the fruits of the earth belong to us all and the earth itself to nobody." So I think this kind of speaks to, imagine the pre-capitalist society. I mean, I guess pre-civil society for Rousseau, but we can reappropriate this here for kind of understanding a capitalist society. Capitalism is kind of founded on private property. And in doing so, you have to have like these ideological and therefore like, it's grounded in the economic, but also therefore the legal system, which is enforcing and perpetuating and justifying and protecting the economic system of capitalism. You got to have somebody to say like, "Hey, this is my shit, and this isn't your shit, but I need you to work for me using my tools to create these new things, which I'll sell and I'll pay you. But like the whole thing is I'm going to make more money than you."
Yeah.
And in regards to the private property, when people make like the argument, "Oh, under communism, it's not like toothbrushes are you don't own a toothbrush, right? It's everybody's toothbrush." I mean, that's just like such a fucking misunderstanding of like private property. You're still going to have like your personal belongings. Like, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I think there's kind of like that common leftist joke of like the communists are coming for your toothbrush, but that's not how that works.
I've actually never heard that, but I can definitely see that as a trope that would be used.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think this ties into the next part of capitalism. It's really about the labor, right? It's capitalism. It really is about the exploitation of wage labor. So I'll try and use some like real life examples of this too, and help me out.
There's so many.
Yeah, I mean, like help me out if you can think of like better examples too.
Uber drivers.
Okay, so we'll talk about Uber drivers real quick. Uber drivers, they are...
excuse me, the drivers own their own cars.
There you go.
Oh, yes.
So there's some good...
That's right.
Yeah, see, there's some interesting critiques there. They're their own business. They can set their own schedule, right? They're not limited to what... Actually, you are limited to, quote unquote, the app company of Uber. But really, come on, let's be real. They're a technology, like a transportation service. That is an interesting...
They're a technology company, and the drivers are #bosses.
It's interesting you bring up Uber because that's like a kind of, I guess you could say a kind of modern phenomenon in the sense that they're independent contractors. So in being an independent contractor, they get to cut, when I mean they, I mean basically the capitalists, the owners of the companies, like the corporations, they get to cut out some of the fat that they have to pay for. So they get to cut out some of like the healthcare or the other benefits that would be given to a traditional worker, not a non-contractual. And in doing so, they get more money and they can like use that money to, I don't know, buy another yacht, another mansion, whatever. They get to keep more money. They get to keep more of the wage away, right? Because they don't have to pay a minimum wage in a sense. From my understanding, I think you do get paid, like if you do so much or whatever, they do pay you a certain amount, right? Because then it's kind of like that incentive. They need workers to.
I think that is a new thing, but that they put up a lot of fight to not do that.
And why would they do that? Why would they put up a fight to actually paying their workers?
Well, number one, they haven't really made money to begin with. Mm. But I guess like just because they want to keep money.
Exactly.
Like if they don't have to worry about paying for health insurance for workers or any of the other, things that come with having a full-time employee, they get to save that money.
Absolutely. Labor is the most expensive part of the process of producing things and running a business. You have to pay your workers, and you have to pay your workers enough for them to not just exist, but live, right? You need them. They need to be able to have that purchasing power to put a roof over their heads, to put food on their plate, for some like go to school, healthcare, etc. Right. And then also at the same time, you kind of have to pay your workers enough so they can buy the fucking products that they're making. I'm talking in general. If you don't do that, and we'll get to that. That's one of the inherent contradictions here. So perfect. So Uber's kind of a really interesting, but it still fits into this kind of model. In regards to back to in general capitalists, they're always constantly trying to increase the amount of profit they make. And the ways that they're able to do this is they create technology, which increases the efficiency of how their products are made. In doing so, they get to they can cut their labor. They don't need as many workers if they have a full work line of robots and machines, and maybe even like more talented workers to produce, for example, like cars or whatever, right? So they,
I'm thinking like Uber, like, say the money that they save on health insurance and paying full-time employees, they use that to put into research for AI to eventually replace those workers, those pesky drivers who want so much.
Absolutely. That would be, and that, legally corporations have an obligation to maximize profits for their shareholders. So what I'm saying here is that business, their whole thing is to make money and to make as much money as possible for their shareholders. I think somebody could argue potentially that we begin to see some of the more, and I'm using air quotes here, quote unquote, like ethical, like capitalism, which we'll get into in a little bit. And I think it's complete bullshit. But like you see, like maybe it would be cheaper for businesses to, when I mean cheaper, I mean like maybe businesses would be able to retain more profit if they weren't using recyclable like containers, but they choose to like lose a little bit of their profit so that, and they use more recyclable stuff so that they have an image. But like, of course they want the image because they'll get more, like consumers, right? Again, it's all about the money. It's all about the profit. So back to the wage labor stuff. Another way that capitalists are able to acquire more profit. So the first one was create more technology or create more technology, and that's more efficient, and therefore they can cut more workers, right? They got more technology to do their shit. You don't have to pay machines. You have to upkeep them, and upgrade them, but you don't have to do that. The second one is they're going to outsource their labor to other countries where labor costs are cheaper. So this is why businesses, corporations send the stuff overseas to other countries that don't have labor, as equal or greater like labor laws for minimum wage or a number of hours they can work a week, because they can exploit that and use their labor and instead pay them $2 a day to pick tomatoes or print things or whatever. And what is that doing?
Yeah.
That's for the, I think the quote unquote American patriot, they see that as they're taking jobs out of America, good jobs out of American hands and putting them overseas with the, XYZ, right?
Yeah. But then, like you're saying, like to the shareholders, they're, geniuses or
absolutely
or whatever. They're applauded.
And it's,
so, I mean,
yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because the ideological thing that's happening here is that the person, that American patriot who's like, they're taking our jobs and send them overseas. Who's doing that? That's your capitalist bosses who are doing that. And instead, the capitalist bosses, the bourgeoisie, that's what I'm saying here. They are convincing you that it's the non-white person across the ocean that is taking your jobs. No, it is the fucking big business doing it, cutting you, the American out. They don't give a fuck about you. They'll put on a show and pretend, but they really don't. They're there to make a profit, right?
That's the bottom line. Actually, this comes to mind too. Just recently, there was a Facebook employee, an engineer at Facebook that killed themselves, I think by jumping off one of the buildings on the campus. And, there's a lot of speculation around it, like a lot of rumors going on, but right now the information that I recently heard was that basically he was stressed out, like he was being overworked. Wow. And also was apparently lied to by his management about, he expressed concerns about the department he was in, how he didn't want to work there anymore. His boss said, basically, if you finish this project for me, I'll make sure that you get put into that other department that you want. And then he finished the project, and the manager gave him a review that made it so it was impossible for him to actually move. And he was also apparently here on a work visa too. So, there's a whole bunch of rumors going on. There's a lot of stuff, but like the thing is, like, Facebook is trying to like just skirt past this thing and not really address it publicly and everything like that too. Cause it's, obviously, like, it hurts their PR, it hurts their look, their image, because they're just trying to make sure that they just, keep the profits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, that just really shows, like, so the question that our patron David asked us is, why is capitalism, not the best system or not a good system? These are some of the inherent flaws that we'll discuss a little bit here, obviously, but also like further and how, like, this is the problem why capitalism will consume itself or basically consume the earth and kill us. But those are reasons why, like, critiques, like, why would we want to have a society like that? Right.
Yeah. Like, why is the well-being of a company based off of GDP? Like, why does
that would be
indicate,
like countries, but like, in particular though, like profit, right? And stocks. And that's what you mean. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
no, absolutely. That'll actually bring me to, I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit just to tie that part that you just said in.
How dare you?
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Sometimes when people critique capitalism, they talk about human nature. Personally, I have problems with this concept of human nature, but let's just go for it. When we're saying human nature, and I'm going to speak from like my understanding of this, there's kind of this question that comes out when we talk about capitalism, right? Luci, you talked about how, like, why would you want to have like a system like that where it's basically profit over people? You hear that slogan in rallies and all that. That's what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way. I mean, I think a lot of people are getting more, like a little more awoken to this idea now. Mm-hmm. But for a long time, it's been like that. A lot of people have said that too. It's just there's just been like the bad guy is the person who values profit over people, to the point where if valuing a person's livelihood gets in the way or inhibits greater profits, then that person is, taken out of the picture in some way or another.
Yes.
It's a classic story, but it's interesting too. Like, I'm going to go on a tangent here a little bit, because it's like, I think of the Hunger Games and the idea of like I don't remember all of the names of the places and the people, but the city where, where the Hunger Games are, like the people that are there, they're dressed in those elaborate outfits and everything. They're kind of like using the poor for their own entertainment and that kind of stuff. And then there's like the rural outsiders who, are just trying to fight against this oppressive, elitist group of people. And it's interesting that it's like, it's kind of like we I guess as more liberal minded people would side more with like Katniss in terms of wanting to overthrow that system. But that system also kind of resembles liberal elitism in terms of like New York elitism when you think of like rural, Oklahoma or something like that. Yet they don't easily side with the ideals of, us quote unquote liberal hippies. I don't know. That's just a little tangent, but it's just.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think some of what you're referencing too, like I remember in the 2016 election, like there was people saying like, this was the rural versus the urban election and all that. Yeah. I don't like when dichotomies are made that way, because then it's like I think that there are differences in the needs of the communities, both urban, rural, and anything in between, right? Suburban. Yeah. But putting that aside, like, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, to tie that back to kind of the human nature argument, right? And why would you want like the system to kind of work that way? I think a good critique of capitalism, and really it's revealing here a problem of capitalism, is why would you structure a system that rewards the worst fucking traits of human potential? Why would you have a system that rewards greed? And then maybe this is a controversial point, but why would you have it reward competition? And competition, I think in some contexts is healthy. I mean, I get it, but like this super hyper emphasis on competition is really toxic and problematic. And I think it overlooks cooperation, which I think if we didn't have cooperation, like in an evolutionary sense, we wouldn't be here. It's not just competition, state of nature bullshit. Yeah. Like that's always, so why would you have a system?
That's such a good point.
Why would you have a system?
Because cooperation is like more ideal.
Yes.
Than competition. Competition, like you can allow competition without, propping it up as this like amazing thing to kind of strive for, competing, outmaneuvering
absolutely
opponents and things like that. Like you can have that still exist, but having more emphasis on cooperation, because the sharing of ideas and information and all that stuff leads to better innovation and
think open source,
better overall human experience.
Yeah, I think
like that's just
open
like
source
that's
technology.
Just,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that's just like objectively true. That's just an objectively true thing.
I think when it comes to cooperation, I think you're rewarding some of the better human potentialities that we have capacities to do. And when it comes to a system where you're rewarding greed, because remember you're legally obligated, like your incentive is to keep acquiring power and money, right? That's what we mean by greed. Same with competition. It's rewarding that, like it's this do or die. These companies are fighting this free market, which we'll get into. Free market fighting each other. And by the way, free market is fucking bullshit. It's never happened. And it shouldn't happen. But also, like, why would you have a system rewarded on hierarchies where there's some people who are better than others? And when I mean that, I mean like there's the rich people and there's the poor people. The poor people are on the streets. The poor people are the homeless who don't work. And, all those bullshit arguments. Like, we're fucking humans. Like, why are you, like, why are you viewing other humans as less than you? That's not the case. That's a fucking social construction you have in your mind that is really fucking oppressive and violent. And two, why would you have hierarchies over the earth, the other animals, the nature, like plants? That's another key part that is really contributing to why we have this climate problem. For people that are interested, you can read Murray Bookchin, just Google him, but read The Ecology of Freedom. He makes an argument that in order to address the climate problem, we have to first address the social hierarchies amongst each other. And then, well, at the same time, but really then we can begin to address the social hierarchies we have over nature, right? That it's, for example, there is a narrative out there that the earth was given to us by a creator and it's for us to, take resources from and extract.
Right. Cthulhu.
Lord Satan. No, he wouldn't do that. So I think there's so many angles we could go at this. And again, we're hitting in we're going to address those in different episodes. I do want to, because we kind of connected in the aspect of nature, and I think it's relevant. It was just the other day, really amazing youth. Greta, what is her last name?
Thunberg?
Apologies, Greta, for mispronouncing that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know what's really sad is that's not the only thing I'm sorry for, Greta. That's just like,
I am so sorry that we are fucking up the world.
I feel like when I watched that speech, it kind of felt like that South Park episode with BP Oil, and the guy's just in the different commercials going like, I'm sorry. Like, that's just how I was like, oh, I'm kind of like that person, because I'm technically an adult now. But I don't feel like it, and I definitely fuck up a lot.
Well, I mean, to go off that point, like the feeling sorry, like we'll listen to her speech in just a second here, but really think about, like, she's addressing those people who, and I'm not targeting you, Luci, but I'm just saying, like, you big business leaders and big country leaders, they go to these climate accord and climate, conventions, and they say, like, we're going to do this, we're sorry we've done this, and we're going to do this by 2020, 2040, whatever, right? It's always about that. And really think about how, like, businesses are going to go as long as they can to maximize profit. Exxon knew about climate change since the 70s, and they did fucking shit about it. They fucking deliberately hid it. And why is that? It's because they wanted to maximize the amount of time that they could be acquiring more profit. So we're going to listen to Greta's speech here that she gave. I believe it was at the UN. I'll correct it at the end if it is different. But she's addressing the issue of climate. And while you're listening to this, really think about, how does this connect to capitalism? Because I think she, without using the word capitalism, is really like addressing capitalism here. So let's go ahead and give that a brief listen.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe.
You can view that more. You saw that clip on the Real News Network. Greta, capitalism is destroying the planet. She didn't use the word capitalism per se, but what do you all think about that?
I mean, it's definitely implied. I saw some people saying that it was that they felt that she may have been coached into not explicitly calling out capitalism. Mm-hmm. Which may or may not be true, but I mean, I think without even saying it directly, I think she still said it.
Yeah, I think
and she said it maybe more effectively, actually.
Yeah, I agree. The meaning is there.
I mean, she mentions the fallacy of infinite growth, economic growth, and like
that quote.
I don't think it's like it. I don't think
it's a little jarring
it's
too with the clapping.
I agree.
It's like when you do an awkward laugh when someone brings up a very like tense emotional subject just out of the blue and you don't really know how to handle it and you just kind of laugh it off because you're just not really well equipped to emotionally handle something like that at the moment. That's kind of what it seems like.
The way I took it was like they were clapping because she basically was saying, I mean, not everybody, but like, I think she was saying what kind of is on everybody's mind, but doesn't want to say it because then you'd be like, oh, you're one of those anti-capitalists, are ya? That quote that you're referring to, Marx, we are in the beginning of a mass extinction and all you can talk about is the money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? Very powerful. I think I'm very happy that the youth are mobilizing and protesting. I don't know about y'all, but last Friday, there was the youth climate protests and there was a lot of signs out there talking about like the consumption of the earth. You're taking and extracting and violently extracting resources from the earth for the sake of profit as if it exists in infinity, and it doesn't. Yeah, I think that's another important point to make here about capitalism is that capitalism functions as if there's infinite resources. It acts as if it can eternally consume. And we know that's not the case.
And at the same time, while we're so focused on maximizing our productivity and efficiency and all that stuff, we somehow haven't found a way to share any of that with the rest of the world who doesn't get to, and they like there's so many people who still like thousands of people who die because of diarrhea or polio still. And like they easily could have gotten some of the benefits of capitalism if it was to be shared rather than hoarded or whatever happened to, all that. But like the idea of just like, I think it would be one thing, it would be a point for capitalism if capitalists were actually trying to use their maybe like capitalist skills to benefit the rest of the world rather than, like I said, like hoarding it and maximizing their profits and out competing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, so the pharmaceutical company Merck, they have in the past, and maybe they are currently, I'm not sure, but in the past they've donated medicine to, I guess the term they would use would be third world countries, underdeveloped countries. Even that term, really think about what does that mean? But anyway, those countries where people are affected by these diseases, and they gave these kind of out for, from my understanding, to little or no cost. Kind of they're doing it as of a good. What's the good? Not good charlatan, but what's the term? Good
Samaritan.
There we go. Good Samaritan kind of way. While I think there are some examples of entities that do it from good intention or even just good out of their heart, I think there's still the problem of, are they doing those kind of things in order to look good to maximize profits? And I don't think also that even if it is the case that they're doing it, that doesn't do away with the criticism in general of these different problems of capitalism and maximizing profit. Because I think there still could I think it would be absurd to say that there's no positive benefits to capitalism. I think there are some, but usually it's for who? It's the people who already have lots of power.
Someone who already has a yacht. I want a yacht.
Just so you could sink it.
I don't want one. I just want to be able to have one and then not buy one and do something else more productive with it.
I think one of the points you talked to earlier also was the benefits of capitalism, other countries getting it. I think something to also consider here is that, and I think also supports this idea of, and this critique of capitalism, that it acts as if there's infinite resources, right? It's constantly consuming, right? It's based on consumerism. There's this issue of planned obsolescence. And when we talk about that, we mean that certain products are made to either be inferior or to break after a certain period of time. And what that does is it kind of creates like, I guess you could say like this kind of insurance for producers that like, hey, we can make the next best thing and people will want it, right? We can totally get into the advertising, which is basically just consumerist propaganda later about like, buy the next iPhone because it has 3 cameras instead of 1 because it's 1 number greater, right? iPhone 9, 10, whatever. But that's a problem here. Like if we were actually wanting to be sustainable, and I think that that is not feasible, especially under capitalism, why would you constantly every year or so like create new products and like the difference is that maybe it has a little bit better processor and it has a better phone so you can take selfies. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's all about the profit. You have to continue to fucking produce and get people to buy. Mm-hmm. I think this ties into this other point that I want to get into about a critique of capitalism, about it being not democratic. Capitalism is socio-economic. And again, that's not just the economics, but it's also heavily influencing and influenced by like the social and political structures, right? I think there's a point to be made, and this is one that I'm borrowing largely from Professor, I guess, Dr. Richard Wolff, but Professor Wolff, and he is at Democracy at Work, excellent economist who's also a Marxist. And I think he makes a really interesting point that as long as workplaces aren't democratic, you're not going to be able to really address the issue of the corporations, the capitalists, the bourgeoisies with all the power, using that power and money that they've basically concentrated wealth, hordes of. They're going to continue to use that money and power to lobby and buy votes. And unless we begin to democratize the enterprise, when I mean that, I mean democratize the workplace, where everybody owns again, going back to the first things, the means of production, the tools, the work, place itself, the stuff in order to make stuff, the resources, all of that. Unless that's all democratized and we all make collective decisions about that, which in turn, if we did that more and more, and you have like corporations dissolve into these like worker co-ops, you're going to have this issue of basically the top fucking people and corporations are going to be able to buy their votes. They're going to be able to sway politicians and political institutions in order to benefit from that. That's why you see these tax cuts for who? The people who have lots of money.
Yeah, and I also think too, like when you're in a position where you have a lot of money, like you have a company that has a lot of money or is making a lot of money, you tend to run in circles.
Yeah,
where you just end up rubbing elbows with people that you can influence in some way or another that have some other type of power in another way, politically or whatever. So they're just like all, like it's like once you hit like a certain tax bracket, almost it seems like there's just a different club that exists.
You unlocked new privileges.
Exactly.
Yeah, you leveled up.
Like as soon as you get a new tax bracket, it's like someone shows up at your house and they're just like I have for you the secret access code. Now you can talk to Barack Obama. And this we're all in the same phone group, Facebook group.
Right. You move up, you become more elite, right? Yeah. I'm still waiting for that knock on my door to it's not the FBI, but instead, it's you get your elite card. I don't know.
It's like Harry Potter. You just get a letter, and Al shows up at your door and is like, "Guess what? you won the game."
Yeah. It's interesting because, ideologically, right? That's the dream. The dream is to be successful, which means you have money and power, which means you become some of the elite. You get the owl at your door, I guess. Does it knock? I don't know. But you know what I'm saying. I think
that's the rude part, is it doesn't knock.
Well, I wouldn't know. I mean, the owl hasn't knocked at my door, so I don't know. I think an interesting point here that needs to be said. And again, this is something that we'll have to address more detail later, but I think we always have to recognize like kind of the history of what's going on here to kind of put into context what's happening. And there's a historical legacy of imperialism. These imperialist powers have long dedicated basically who gets what and who gets where and who gets who. And so I think that kind of contributes to this historical legacy of not only inequity and disenfranchisement for certain groups, but also who, in a legacy sense, like who kind of has more power over the people.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's definitely like an important aspect.
It's like, I mean, I guess if we go down that route, then we're kind of going back to our whiteness episode.
Oh yeah,
a little bit, but like, I mean, just today, I was watching the docu-series on Bill Gates on Netflix, and
I've been meaning to watch that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's very interesting. I think it's 3 episodes.
3 episodes too many.
But like he clearly he has like a special kind of mind, right, to begin with, but also just like his access to resources at a young age. It's like when I see these documentaries, I always just kind of get like, I wish they would spend more time like dissecting or like going into the fact that like, yeah, like all of that other stuff that they had access to when they were like 6, like that got them to where they are now. Like, but just skim past it as if it's like, the typical American story where,
dropped out of college,
kid goes to school buys latest laptops.
Yeah.
Like whatever the kind of machine is. Like, how every kid has like a mom that works in the government and knows all the right people to talk to and everything, and like has connections with billionaires to help him, achieve his dreams for owning his own business. Like that typical American story.
Mom, put Ronald Reagan on. I'll call Ronnie. Yeah.
There's literally a story where he, where his mom says, I got this, I can't remember, this multi-billionaire. He's like, I got this multi-billionaire, I can't remember the name, whatever, it's a multi-billionaire. And he wants to meet you. You should meet him. And Bill, this is like when he's like building Microsoft, he goes, oh, I can't right now, I'm too busy. Like I can't do that. And his mom insists that he goes to meet him. And then he's like, oh, I fine, but I can only stay for 90 minutes. And then of course they talk for like, hours because they realizes this man helps him realize like, oh shit, I'm a capitalist. Let's talk more about business and money and shit.
Well, I think that really speaks to like, there's kind of like the overlooked things. Like it was like, he just worked hard and made a business, like, different figures that we uphold because they did it. They were successful, but you're right. It's who, and the connections you have, the resources you have available, and kind of, again, tying back to the historical legacy of imperialism and also like racism and, xenophobia, like all of that's tied in. That really kind of shapes like who you got access to. I'm not saying it keeps you out like entirely. I mean, for some people, they have that kind of access, but by and large, look at the history. And not the revisionist like history, not that bullshit.
And I'm not talking about like, it's like, oh, like just because you have access to those people or those kinds of things that it means that you're going to be successful. It's just, you have options.
Yeah. You have a greater like a plethora of a cornucopia of options.
Yeah. It's like you downloaded, a new DLC pack for your RPG game.
Called Life.
It comes with different storylines and different.
It's like that Rick and Morty episode
that you can go on
with when he goes into the arcade and he's like playing the game of life and a carpet falls on him and it's like,
exactly.
I wish that game was real.
You were able to buy the DLC to get more quest lines.
It was pre-installed because your family pre-ordered it for you. Don't worry, they gave you the white edition, so you get
deluxe edition.
Oh, okay. Let's address just some of the counter arguments that you hear in regards to when you critique capitalism. These aren't all of them, but I think there's some that I think you kind of do hear every once in a while. At least I know when I have those conversations, I get into it. All right. First one, capitalism or the free market or money, whatever, competition, those incentivize innovation through competition. So the argument, this counter argument here would be, look, if it wasn't for competition, we wouldn't have the iPhone. We wouldn't have penicillin. We wouldn't have hard-boiled eggs. What are you going to do? Checkmate, socialists.
My dumb argument to that is we didn't need that. We needed the penicillin, but I don't think that was actually, I don't know the history, but I don't think it was spurred by profits. I could be wrong.
I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it was invented during World War II. And I think it was from like fungus, but I think it had like a war, military.
Was it one of those things that was discovered by accident?
I don't know. I mean,
damn it.
Sometimes people take shrooms and things happen on accident. And I don't know if it's the same thing with penicillin. Don't think so.
I sound so dumb now.
Oh, no.
But I know the iPhone wasn't like we would have survived without that iPhone. Yes, the iPhone's awesome, but we would have survived without that.
I think we should be careful though, because I think one of the key things here to kind of address this counter argument that capitalism incentivizes innovation through competition. So really that's a response to like, oh, let's work together more, maybe more open source, whatever. What really comes down to here is that like, look, when you're talking about the iPhone, for example, what really made the iPhone? Labor made the iPhone. It's the workers that made that iPhone. And what it comes down to here is essentially, I mean, this is the counter argument that they're essentially making here is that essentially exploitation incentivizes innovation. If you're going to make the argument that capitalism incentivizes innovation through competition, you're actually saying exploitation is what incentivizes innovation. And, we talked about this in early on in the episode, but, that's a lot of this is being consumerism like bullshit, like a new phone each year and so forth.
Checkmate capitalists.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Go back. Just take one step back. Without capitalism, we would have insulin as medication for diabetes. We would have that because as far as what I've seen is the creator of insulin put it out there and didn't copyright or anything like that.
That's right.
But
a couple of those, yeah.
But under capitalism, the price of that is up to like $400 a vial or something like that.
Oh, well, that's just free market. Obviously. No, yeah. I mean, that's a great point because like, I think what you're saying is like really like, I'm pretty sure if we all work like together, we can probably come up with some things and we didn't need to exploit each other in order to like kind of come up with it. I'm pretty fucking sure. I mean, don't call me an optimist, but like, come on.
God, it's so depressing about the insulin.
I know.
Thank you. That's what I come here for. I make everybody sad. Have a good night.
Which is because innovation is important, but innovation that's the whole thing is like I mean maybe, and this is kind of like I guess my like more my more like hippie ideas coming out. It's like, but I just believe that we would have solved a lot of stuff on our own, or we will solve a lot of things on our own without being motivated by greed and capitalism and profits. Like there's a lot of stuff that we could have solved as people just by the fact that like we don't want to die, we don't want to suffer, we don't want to have diseases and stuff like that. Like things would have come about to help us. It would have looked different probably and maybe not as sleek and shiny, but I think that if we gave it a chance, we would be able to solve a lot of issues if we were given the opportunities and given the incentives to just work with each other for the sake of cooperation.
Yeah, I don't think that innovation is inherent to like just competition and capitalism and all that. I mean, what of all like the things we've discovered and created prior to capitalism, the 17th century? I mean, I'll never understand how the wheel was invented without a market incentive. Like, come on.
Even if you look at like just the competition, between companies within the market or whatever, like they, as far as like product development and all that, on the development side, on the actual production side, like it's groups of people, cooperating together to make the thing. Like who's designing the iPhone, it's going to be there's a design team. It's a bunch of people. It's not just one person.
Yeah.
So it's this weird thing where it's like a bunch of these groups of employees cooperating together to make the product to compete with one another.
No, it's Steve Jobs. He had an idea. He made the iPhone. Don't stop.
I mean,
that.
that's like a whole nother thing where like a lot of these companies are reportedly have issues where employees try to outmaneuver their other employees.
Right. So we'll talk about that again in a future episode. Well, that's the alienation, right? Capitalism pits workers against workers because
there's only two promotions spots, and there's like 60 people in this department. So I need the promotion.
Have you seen my design for the new iPhone? It has 4 cameras.
And it's better than Steve's.
I'm going to skip one of the, and then come back to one of the criticisms, but I love this criticism. It's great. I think I have actually had it said to me before, but this one in particular is when they call out the hypocrisy of being anti-capitalist, but you're using an iPhone or a laptop or something that, they are assuming, of course, that capitalism's made it, right? I love this criticism. It's so great. It's so powerful. It's changed my mind. I've become a capitalist now. I
are capitalist.
So
I am capitalist.
The argument is like, oh, if we catch them in their hypocrisy, we see how bullshit their argument is, which itself is a logical fallacy. So they'd say like, oh, but it's so hypocritical of you that you're writing that blog post about how capitalism is so terrible, but you're using a MacBook, and that was a product of capitalism. Number one, is it truly a hypocrisy of being against capitalism, but you live in the fucking damn capitalist society, so you don't have an alternative? Like, what do you want me to do? Go out into the forest and line up some rocks and write my blog post with rocks and like put it in the ground and be like, I did it without capitalism. Like, come on, we live in a fucking society. Number one. Yeah. And two, it's a fucking two quoque logical fallacy. And what I mean by that is it's the appeal to hypocrisy, and it's a fallacy that intends to discredit the opponent's argument by asserting that the opponent's failure to act consistently in accordance with its conclusion. So to put that into an example for listeners here, just because someone uses technology doesn't mean their criticism is therefore null. A great example of this is a smoker, and they could even be smoking a cigarette right in front of you and saying, I don't think that you should smoke. They're telling their child, hey, I know you've seen me smoke my whole life, but you shouldn't smoke. If you call out that smoker and say, how hypocritical of you, I'm not going to believe you, mom, and then you bust out a cigarette because you think they're hypocritical. No, even somebody who is being hypocritical, quote unquote, they can still give you like completely valid argument as to why you shouldn't do it, yet they continue to do it. So
yeah,
I think
I feel like those are the same kind of people who would look at a story where they're like, oh, this guy had to walk 40 miles back and forth from school. He did that for 3 years until one day he graduated, and look at him. He's such a shining example. And everyone goes like, yeah, that's hard work. Good job. And then, but no one's like, or like why did he have to do that? Why was the system so bad that he had to walk so far all the time just to go to high school?
Right.
I feel like those are the same people who would not see,
Yeah.
you know, or the same kind of thing. Like I've also heard like from family members, where I would go like, oh man, I can't wait for a universal basic income. Like I really want that to be a thing. And they're like, why would you want that? Like you work so hard to get where you are now. Why would you want that? Like that because of what you just said. Because I had to work. So I don't want. That's not something that I should be proud of. That's something I just had to do.
Yeah.
And no one should have to do that if they don't have to do that. Like that's just stupid.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I was having a conversation with my partner earlier about that. And like, you know, some days you just want to like sleep in. You don't want to go to work. And why? And because you don't want to fucking work today. I don't want to work. Why would I want to spend like 40 hours of my week working? And yeah, 9 to 5. Why would I want to do that? I have much better things to do with, you know, with my friends, family, and my community, and like, then go to work and like sit in front of a desk and type fucking away. And like, did you do this?
And there's like so many studies that show that if you're not even actually working the full 8 hours.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Employers know that.
I'm pooping for like 2 hours. I mean, you got to milk it, but no, I'm just kidding.
Like everyone understands like the last hour of work, like there's not a whole lot going on, but yet it's still required that you stay there and you work and you just type away. Like what is happening?
Right. So where were we on that?
Sorry, I derailed the conversation.
No, you're good. I think that's an interesting point though, because I do think that in a capitalist society, one of the kind of key things that you have to have people who believe and support capitalism, they have to believe that their own personal value and worth in society is equivalent to them working hard and producing what they produce. And I think that that's a problem when you are convinced that you're not valuable or worth, you know, you don't have a human personal value because you're not producing or being a contributing worker in society. I think that's a problem. I think a relevant thing here, like in Japan, like you have workers who are overworked and they're paid to go on holiday, and you have people literally dying at their office desks because they're working too hard to the point of exhaustion, and they die. Yeah.
It's so sad and it's so unnecessary and so stupid because at the same time, there's two people like if the next quarter budget report shows them that firing you is beneficial, guess what's happening? You're done. It doesn't matter how hard you worked. You're just done. You're cut.
Yeah. That's just, and I think the response, and I already heard it in my head, like the response to what we kind of just said was like, wow, that's totally what a slacker would say. Like, I mean, even in a non-capitalist society, like you're going to contribute, I assume you're going to contribute to like your community, your friends, family, and whatever to like, you know, help people survive. But I don't think you're going to still be doing, I assume, like the 40-hour work week per se of like what we have now. So there's a really great book for people interested. What is it called? Damn it. I will remember in a second. If not, we'll put it in the show notes. But it's basically on time. And it talks about how, for example, in the feudal era, time wasn't kind of like this really strict, like 9 to 5, like whatever bullshit that we have today. Instead, it was more like fluid, and it was more like seasonal, and it had to do more with the farming. And you spent most of your time in the year, like you actually spent it like not working. You spent it with your community, building the relationships, nurturing those, doing what had to be done, in the sense that if you had to go and like water the fields and till the fields and like harvest and reap it, like you did that, but you had so much more time, and there were actually more holidays actually than today, but more time to nurture the community. But then the Industrial Revolution kicks in. They need more workers. The capitalists need more profit. They actually create the Werken clock and the work clock, this public clock that's put display to make sure workers get to work on time. Because if you're not there by when the clock strikes 9 or whatever, you're in trouble. You're going to lose your job. It's really fascinating. I'll if it's not, I'm not going to remember, damn it, but we'll put in the work in the notes, but really fascinating to read that, like, even the concept of time, the concept itself is like a social construction totally manipulated by the socioeconomic system of capitalism. And what for? It's for the capitalist benefit, for profit, for maximizing that. It's all about control. So the other kind of critique is free market. I'm just going to go over it briefly because I think we should save some of this for next segments, especially alternatives to capitalism. The critique, I think, that you hear a lot in our society is this notion of like free market. Some of the things that I have, like issues I have with free market, like number one, we don't live in a free market. When you hear this, you hear like, it's usually associated with neoliberalism. They want zero regulation on the market because they want the market to essentially play out via competition. And in doing so, it'll create like the best outcomes. That's bullshit. And it's bullshit because, number one, it's never fucking happened in history. And like, you could be like, well, so is communism. It's like, actually, I disagree with them. But, and I'm not saying the Soviet Union. I'm saying like, I'm saying something else. But
there's inferior products that went out all the time in the free market.
Yeah. And so right. And if you don't have a political institution regulating what happens, do you know what that results in? That results in no minimum wage laws. That results in no antitrust laws, which is designed to protect consumers from predatory business practices. That means there isn't going to be monopolies that are just going to dominate the market, set the price and say, yeah, it's the free market, we won. And you know what? You can dig in your pocket and pull out an extra $20 every month because, sorry, we won. So there's
what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? You going to revolt? You going to have a revolution?
Oh, it'd be a shame if something was to happen to your family and then you weren't able to do anything about it.
No.
No, please, I just want porridge. I don't know.
So those were some of the critiques of capitalism, the objections to the critiques of capitalism. Some of the alternatives, I think just in general, some of the alternatives to capitalism will be some of the things we've critiqued, meaning that a system that isn't capitalist won't have some of these things, such as exploitation, private property, etc. We will go into a future episodes about different alternatives, and there are actually alternatives that are, counter to this dominant discourse of capitalism in the world. Some examples: the Zapatistas and the Chiapas, who just expanded territory earlier this week in Rojava, which is kind of the democratic Syrian areas in the Middle East. And there's a few other examples we can talk about. Even in history, there's even more. But we'll get into that in a future episode. I hope that this kind of tied together and addressed some of the question, at the very least, David, about why is capitalism bad. We've pointed out some of the things. We really appreciate you reaching out to us with that question, and we will expand on that further. But we just want to let our listeners and our patrons know, like, we're back on the horse. Actually, no, we're not on the horse. We're standing up again. We're moving next to the horse. I don't know. And
the horse is its own person. It makes its own decisions. We can get on the horse, but only if the horse offers.
Right. So we're back on track. Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to address before we kind of close out of this episode?
Also, one more thing to David. Another part of his email that he sent was, the other part had to do with the game industry and crunch culture specifically. Right. And yes. I want to bring up some of that stuff in the future episodes related to this as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's a lot.
Because there has been, not only on crunch, but then also like sexual harassment and assault and stuff like that within the industry, which is, I think, tied specifically into the system, the economic system, and the kind of the power structures and the hierarchy that is born out of that.
Absolutely. So thank you again for reaching out. Listeners, please contact us at publicspacetravel@gmail.com. Reach out to us and we will be more than happy to address some of the questions and topics that you might have for the future. I am Lazarus Wolf. With me is Luci.
You can find me on Twitter at PSTLuci.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm just PST Lazarus. Again, I'll check the notes. I'm so bad at that. And also our shadow producer, Marks.
I am not very often on Twitter at PST in the shadows.
You can find me at my local Apple store buying everything.
All right. Until next time, we are Public Space Travel.
Public space travel.
Don't worry, buddy.